Hello, I'm Dwight Marlowe, and thank you for joining us today. We pray that this program will be a blessing to you. So now, please enjoy today's witness. Well, I want to thank you again for being with us tonight. For the last couple of weeks, we've had Doug Hollick on with his music and his testimony, and it's just tremendous, the ministry work that they're doing. Tonight, we've got Teri, his wife, on with us. And I have had a chance to hear Teri give her testimony a couple of times. She's not like a lot of folks where I've never heard it, so I do know her testimony. And the way, and Doug quite often says that, the way that they support one another in ministry and with really with a lot of different issues as a background and where they're coming from, and still to come together. It's amazing, how it works sometimes with marriage. It's just magic. So anyway, like I said, I've heard Teri, but again, I'm just looking forward to have her tell her full story, because a lot of times she's just sort of filling in when or expanding and when Doug's done give his testimony. But tonight we just got her by herself, and he's not here, so it'll be good. So Teri, welcome to the show, and I'll just tell your story.
Well, Dwight, remember my story's really short because Doug was the one with all the issues.
Right.
No, but that's not true. For me, my parents were really young when I was born, and I have a younger brother. And I think I had a really good life. I grew up with a Jewish mom, and my dad had converted to Judaism when my parents got married. And so I had a bat mitzvah when I was 13, and I was one of those people, or probably younger people, that did really well in school and tried really hard. And I was the oldest of all my cousins, and so my grandparents always looked at me, and everybody, I was kind of like on the pedestal because I did really well. But my parents got divorced when I was 13, and one of my biggest struggles and battles was I started having an eating disorder and struggling with my body image and wouldn't eat all day. And I remember I had an English class after lunch, and it just so happened to be my husband's aunt. And that's another part of the story I'll share a little bit later. But, I never told my mom or my parents that I was doing this, and I went to the doctor, and, they were trying to figure out what was wrong. But, it was something that I carried inside, and, just didn't like who I was and didn't like how I looked, and so I really struggled with that. And a few years later, I started experimenting with drugs and drinking, and I was always like searching for something. I knew that something was missing in my life, and even with growing up in the Jewish faith, there's that relationship with God, but we didn't read the Bible, because people will hear that I'm Jewish and they'll tell me, you probably know the Old Testament. But what I learned about living, in a Jewish home and going to Sunday school, and I also went to Hebrew school to have my bat mitzvah, was mainly just like the history of Israel and not so much about the relationship with the Lord.
Right.
And so I was 19 years old, and I had gone to college. I'm from Tucson, Arizona, and was going to the University of Arizona. And after being there 9 months, I dropped out. And shortly after, I met my husband, and he just came from Western New York. He had just he had just finished college, and I always say he was looking for a wife, but he really wasn't. But we met, and we ended up moving in together, and shortly after that, we moved back to Western New York. And
they had this connection through your English teacher being his aunt.
I forgot about that. But it just so happened when he asked, he was sharing that he had one relative in Arizona, in Tucson, and he told me her name, and her name was June Pennington, and I'm like, no way, that was my 9th grade English teacher, so, and then there happened to be two girls with the same name. My maiden name was Teri Brown, and there was another Teri Brown, and so they were so glad because this teacher and Doug's aunt had said that I was the good Teri Brown, so he picked the right one. But so Doug and I moved back to New York, and you've heard my husband's testimony about his drug use, and so, we used drugs, but I was one that I could always stop. It was like we needed to pay our rent, and I was trying to be responsible, even though I was doing some irresponsible things that, we needed to stop. And for me, I never understood how my husband wasn't able to stop. And so I kind of share in my story that, for so many years I always looked at him as the bad guy, that he was one with the issues, because if he would have gotten his life straightened up and, wasn't using money for drugs and all of that, then we would be okay,
Right.
So, but, when I was 24, I had this wild experience, and it was kind of like God was, I don't know, just, it's a testimony in itself, but my father had just accepted the Lord like 9 months prior to that. And what he did was, he was living in Florida, and Doug and I were still living in Western New York. And when my husband accepted the Lord, he called and shared his testimony with me, and, never tried to give me a hard time or sway me into, changing my life over. But I had this kind of thing happen at night. I was going to bed, and I suddenly was frozen. And and so it was like really scary for me. And a few weeks before, I had watched the Sally Jesse Raphael show. It was the talk show, and there was somebody on there talking about like parapsychology, having ghosts in their house and all that. And so as I'm frozen and my husband's right next to me, and I'm trying to speak in all of this because I'm really scared. And I knew I wasn't sleeping because my room looked exactly like it did when I was awake. And so here, being Jewish, there was some powerful thing that I never used the word Jesus. And so for me, I knew God. So in my head, when I kind of closed my eyes when I was in the midst of this, and I saw the little devil as I had always pictured him, with, the little pitchfork and the red suit, and even said devil on it, and the long tail, and then I was really scared. And so what I did, I remembered this Sally Jesse Raphael show. There happened to be a Jewish person in the audience, because they were saying that if there's a ghost in your house, what you need to do is accept the Lord, and have, put crosses in your house and just say, Jesus is here, and the ghost supposedly goes away. And who knows if that's all true?
Right.
I don't really know. But at that moment, it was just like, God, help me, and it went away, whatever was paralyzing me. And so I wake up my husband, he was sleeping, and I just told him what happened. He's like, oh, you were dreaming. So I'm like, okay. But the next day, things started happening that it just was, this was real, and it was scary. And so because of my dad's testimony, he had this wild testimony, I called him up and I told him. And at the time, he was really busy at work. He was a hotel manager, and he was asking me questions, and then he would get interrupted. And he said, you know what, I've got to go to work. I'm at work, let's talk later. So that night, he called me, and he had said he was reminded by his wife that he had had a dream the night before, and there was this like big dragon type monster thing, and there was a girl on the other side, and he recognized that after sharing with his wife that it was me in that dream. And so I was like so scared. And so I said, yeah, what should I do? And he's like, well, the only thing I can tell you is for you to accept the Lord. And I was like, there was this battle going on that I was like arguing with him, but what about my Jewish grandmother? And I'm the oldest child, oldest grandchild. And he says, well, your grandmother really needs us also. So I did. I finally prayed with him. And at that moment, I could really feel the sensation of everything in my body, like all this bad stuff going away, literally feeling this sensation. And I remember I was on the phone with him for an hour, and when I got off the phone, Doug said there was this complete change in me, like a glow, like a brightness about me, And so, then I started stopping, the drinking and any drugs, and I smoked for a few months, and I stopped smoking, and just kind of really, plugged in. And Doug grew up in the Methodist church, and I'd even gone before I'd accepted the Lord at that point to the Methodist church, because that was the only thing I knew. But yeah, so I was on a journey after that, and read my Bible. I still, to this day, this was years before that I read my Bible, but that didn't mean that there wasn't struggles in my life.
Right.
So I guess the next really big thing that happened was we had tried for a very long time to have children, and I had lots of fertility issues, and so we went to fertility doctors and found out that I had really bad like endometriosis, scar tissue, and when we had first decided to do all of the tests with it, we said we would do it for 1 year because it's expensive, it's emotionally toiling on you, and so at the end we did a special procedure, and I didn't get pregnant. So we prayed about it, and a few years later we decided we would try again, and this time did like the in vitro procedure, and I got pregnant. And a cool story about that is, like, few months before you were going to try this, I was looking at a devotional, and it came across Psalm 37:4 that says, "If you delight yourself in the Lord, He will give you the desires of your heart."
Right.
And I knew at that moment that I was going to get pregnant, because when we had gone through it a few years prior, it was like Doug would think I was pregnant, and I would be like, "No, I don't think so," because I didn't want to be so devastated, because I thought I probably wasn't. So I prepared myself every month. But I did. I knew I was going to get pregnant. And we went to a different doctor, and he was a Christian this time, and he even prayed for us, the night before the actual first part of the procedure. And I did. I got pregnant, and had, didn't know what she was at the time before we had her, but had the, incredible pregnancy, because I'm one of those, like it says you can't do this, I will never do it. I was kind of neurotic about taking care of myself to the point it drove Doug crazy sometimes, but I had her, had to have a C-section, and here, I was an older mom. I was in my late 30s, and so, after she was 6 months old, I was trying to be that perfect mom, and you find out a lot about this when you've had struggles with getting pregnant, because you had this dream of having a baby, but then the reality comes, and it's hard,
Mm-hmm.
And here I prayed for this child, and she's an amazing child, and healthy and all of that, but the thing of not sleeping and just all of that, I was just kind of burning out. And being an older mom, I'd been on my own, I was independent, career woman and all that, and had been in the accounting field for a while, and it was almost like I wouldn't let other people help me. I'd let Doug help me, but other people, and so I wouldn't have people really babysit her a lot. And so I finally crashed about 6 months after I had her, and
just a physical collapse. Emotional,
all of it.
All of
it. Yeah. We were driving down to visit family, like 100 miles south of where we lived in Arizona, and I had no energy. I was starting to get real anxious, and my heart was beating, out of my chest. My hands and feet were going numb, and I just didn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had died a month after I prayed with him when I was 24 of a heart attack.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, this is what's happening to me. And I'm, telling Doug, I'm not feeling good. Please take me to the hospital. So he ended up taking me to the emergency room, and they took a bunch of blood tests. And here I didn't have like all these different vitamins you should have in your body. And I was breastfeeding, and they said, you need to stop breastfeeding because you're really sick. And so I got out of the hospital, I didn't stay overnight, and then, went to my mom's house where we were going to visit, and then just kept getting worse to the point where I was starting to hallucinate. I was seeing just these wild things and just not sleeping, and Doug called my doctor in Tucson, and they said to bring me back to Tucson, and they thought maybe I had a tumor or something. So they did against my will. They encouraged me and pretty much put me in the car and take me back to Tucson. And it just was like, I was just seeing all these crazy things. And so we went to the hospital, and they ran some tests. They did like a CAT scan and said there was nothing wrong. And while we were waiting for the results, at one point, I left the hospital. I was in this t-shirt and just had my socks on, when I was dressed, and just left the hospital. I was running down the street, and I remember going into a preschool trying to see if someone could help me, because I'm thinking, they're admitting me to the hospital, and I didn't want to be there. And eventually the preschool was kind of nervous, because here's this kind of crazy woman in there, like, what does she want? Here's these children. So I ended up going through a neighborhood and found somebody and knocked on the door, and at that point I'm thinking my husband and my brother was there too, and I thought they were probably worried about me. And so I told the man, I says, this is a story, and he's like probably thinking this lady is absolutely crazy. But he said, my sister works at the hospital, which was really right down the road, and he said, I'll take you back. So here I got in this guy's car, and he brought me back, and went in the hospital, and they were all upset because where have you been? And then they needed to leave to get some stuff at our house for me, and I had a guard watching me. So after they couldn't find anything physically wrong, they talked to the medical staff, and there was a mental hospital right next door. And they said she really needs some help, mental help.
Right.
And so it ended up then the same thing, talking to me for a while. You really should go. They're going to help you. And I did. I finally did go. And I was just, to this point, I was just like, it was my mind was getting worse and worse. And so checked me in. It was the Friday after Thanksgiving, and went in, for 3 days. And I don't like to take medication. And so they were trying to get me to take a low dosage sleeping pill to at least get some sleep.
Right.
And so I did. I finally did. And I mean, that was a whole experience in itself, because I felt like I was on a mission. I'm in a mental hospital, and it's scary. You're scared, first of all, with what you're going through, and then you're in that situation where, I mean, they take your shoelaces away, and they say that, worried about your, hurting yourself, hanging yourself or something. But, they'd come in and they'd say, "Are you okay?" And I would kind of I was still in the midst of this illness, and I'd say, "Well, no, I'm hanging myself, but I'm okay." So just kind of bizarre stuff I was thinking, but I started getting better. And they were gracious, because they would let my family come in and see me, and they'd bring my daughter, because I hadn't been away from her overnight before. I was sleeping and eating good. I started getting better.
Right.
And so over the weekend, you kind of just would go to groups and all that. And it was sad, because I went to this group, I remember, and there were like probably 20-year-olds or close to 20-year-olds, and they were all arguing about who was cutting themselves the worst. And I'm thinking, these people are really crazy. I need to get out of here, and here I was kind of in the midst of it too. But it was just a really scary seeing these kids of what they've gone through. So Monday morning, Doug comes in, we meet with like a caseworker and the psychiatrist, and he said that my diagnosis was postpartum psychosis, and about 1% of moms will get this.
Right.
And he said I'd probably be in the hospital for 30 days, and it would probably take a full year for me to recover. And I just said, I am not staying here. And I looked at Doug, I said, please, and I would start, get upset and react, and they'd be, you need to be quiet. I'm like thinking, I'm the patient, I need to be able to talk. So finally, I remember asking the psychiatrist, I said, well, do you believe in Jesus? And he said, I'm not at liberty to discuss that. And I said, well, I'm leaving. And so, they said I could leave, but it would be against, the recommendation. And so I did. I promised Doug I would do anything he wanted. I'd go to counseling. I'd make sure I took better care of myself. I'd ask for people to help me. So I did. I left, and I didn't go on any medication. And then a few years later, I started struggling with some depression and started taking an antidepressant. And then, you've heard some of my husband's story, Doug's story, but when he finally hit his bottom and he was using the heroin at the end, he was going to go away for like a few months to get help for what he was struggling with. And so right when he left, I was starting to find out all the reality of what he was doing. I did not know he was using heroin for like 9 months. And I crashed again, had like a panic attack, and ended up going to the hospital. I called 911, and this time I'm thinking I am having the heart attack. Went in, and then ended up the next day, my family took me to see a psychiatrist, like a friend they knew. And he diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. And so I went on all these medications. This time I was on an anti-anxiety and a mood stabilizer and like an antipsychotic drug. And here my husband's going to be gone for up to 13 months. I have a 4-year-old daughter. My husband left a business that he was part owner and was going to leave for 13 months. And it was kind of like not in a really good position because of finances that he used for his addiction. And I mean, I was a mess. And so, so for 3 months, somehow I tried to function. They kept changing my medication, and it was just like the hardest time of my life. But my husband ended up coming home, and then I remember this one morning after they kept changing medication, and I couldn't sleep, and I was just like, I just had was at burnout and kind of a breakdown. And this one morning I got up and I had some over-the-counter sleeping pills, and I just like wanted to sleep pretty much, but I was just tired of all that was going on. And I got up and I counted them. I took like 10 sleeping pills, and was just kind of in a state where I couldn't talk, barely could move, and kind of communicated to Doug what I had done and went to the hospital. And I remember just being there for that experience, because they were going to either pump my stomach or they would give you charcoal to drink to kind of get all of the medicine out of my body. And they just treated me really bad, and I just, here was a person that I was hurting and going through a hard thing, and how they kind of looked down on me. And I just could really sense that, because I have a sensitive, well, I really have a heart for people that struggle with mental illness because I've been there.
Right.
And so, got out, and our church had started a recovery ministry a few months before that, and it was a faith-based recovery ministry. And both Doug and I had decided, because he came through this experience. He was in the Ministry of Teen Challenge. It's a Christ discipleship program, and he was on fire for the Lord. His life, he realized God had forgiven him, always loved him, and he was forgiven for what he had done. And it was like I was so used to living with an addict for so long that I was almost like on a pedestal, that I would get mad at Doug and ask him to leave, and he wanted to please me so much he did not want to leave. So I kind of found years later, being in recovery, that I kind of like that power, and so we both decided that we needed to both get help. And so we did. We started going to this, it was called Celebrate Recovery. And I started working on my issues and not blaming Doug, because now there really was nothing to blame him about because he was not using drugs.
Right,
he was upfront and honest about everything with his life. And so, so we started that. And then, we did that for a few years. And then Doug's probably shared a lot of the story. But, he started recording music and, recorded 4 CDs, had a band.
Right.
We started homeschooling our daughter. And we would travel with the band sometimes, and then sometimes just the 3 of us would travel. And we ended up going through Tennessee a few times and found out we love this area of the country, and decided, well, our daughter's homeschool. We had owned an insurance agency, and we had sold a few years prior to do this full time. And we thought, what's keeping us here? Let's just move. And so, 2011, 3 of us just came here, visited at one time, decided we wanted to stay, and then we've been here ever since.
Yeah. So the Lord, you're not the first person that I've run into that the Lord has sort of led to this area, but we're sure glad you're here. One of the things that you said about Doug, and you too, whenever I hear your testimony, is the honesty in it. You share openly about not only the problems that you had all the way around with his addiction, and then the just the issues that you dealt with, just trying to keep your sanity through everything, just trying to deal with all those things. It's you never can tell who that'll reach, but the honesty reaches people. It just, there's nowhere. And something you said there that's really true, that you have not only sympathy, you have empathy and sympathy. You've been where people have been that not everybody can reach and touch, and I know you have a ministry right now that you're working with women that you're just getting into, and you all are meeting where we filmed Doug at downtown at Shades of Grace, right? As part of the is that part of the Get Real ministry itself, or is this something that you're doing outside of that, or is it all under the Doug Hollick and the Get Real ministries that you do?
It's all together. Yeah.
Okay. But this is more geared towards women and testimonies about where they're at and helping women just find their way, I guess, from all those issues they have, that we all have.
Yeah, just a safe place. It's called For Women Only. I was like, what should I call it? I'm thinking that's too simple. But really that's what it's about, For Women Only. And it's similar to our Get Real on Friday nights. But we'll just share testimonies. We started 2 weeks ago, and we're hoping it lasts for a while.
Yeah, well, super. And we've been streaming information about their ministry, and if you'd like to get in touch with Doug or Teri, just do so, because they're always willing to help. They're always willing to help on that, and they also need help. They need prayers. That's the only thing we really ask for, is prayers ourselves. But prayers, I know you're running a ministry, y'all travel quite a bit. I know there's a need for financial support there, so if anybody could support financially, it'd just be wonderful. But just get acquainted with it, and you can go on site where they're with the information that we're providing there. And we're going to do we're going to have Doug to do a little music for us here to sort of end the program tonight. So, and appreciate you coming in and being so open to share with us there like that. Okay, and just want to thank everyone, and enjoy Doug.
It's a messed up time to be thinking you're over it. All the damage, all the pain. There's a part of our life I imagine you won't forget. All the lying, those tears of shame. Forgiving is the easy part, forgetting ain't quite the same case. You're living with an addict's heart, I'm dying with my sin each day. Love me for life, I'm begging you. Hang close and tight. Don't let me go. Stay right here. I can't understand why you want this broken down man. I'm graced by your beauty, blessed by your love. I'm blessed by your love. I'm blessed by your love.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Joyful Witness is a non-denominational ministry, and we're currently looking for people that would like to share their testimony. So if you'd like to be on our program, or if you know someone that has a testimony that they'd like to share, please call me, Dwight Marlowe, at 423-349-7777, or you can reach me by email at dmarlowe1@charter.net. Thank you much, and we'll see you next week.